Even if it is meant to represent the true God of the Bible. I mentioned take a look at the altar when we were at the tabernacle model the other day. What do you see different about this one specifically over on the right hand side here? Did you guys see that when we were on the other side?
Steps.
Yeah, steps. God specifically says, do not ever use steps to get up to my altar. He says use a ramp, and that's what was in that model. Again, intention's good maybe, but they did it wrong. They did what they were not supposed to do. So, Paul says this in Colossians, and this verse is often used as an argument against those of us that keep the biblical festivals. He says in Colossians 2:16, therefore no one is to act as your judge in regard to food, drink, or in respect to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day, things which are a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. So they say, well, see, these are shadows, you don't need to do them. But the thing is that they all point to Christ. And really, I think the argument here is more about judging than it is to do with anything else. But he's saying the festivals and things point to Jesus Christ. So if we're not doing them right, if we're not doing the festivals the way God says, it distorts the image, it distorts the shadow. So looking specifically at the celebration of Easter in Christianity. So Jesus was crucified at Passover. Passover is one of the biblical festivals found in Leviticus 23. And you go through them in order. He's crucified at Passover. He rises on first fruits. That's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians, Jesus is the first fruits of the resurrection. But Constantine comes along, and for entirely bad reasons, changes when the resurrection is celebrated. Constantine comes along and says, they're using the Roman calendar, and on the Roman calendar, which differs from, as some people call it, the Jewish calendar, I prefer to call it the biblical calendar. It's God's calendar. The Jews happen to be the ones that use it, but God's the one who told them how to do it, so it's His. In fact, in Leviticus 23, as God lists the festivals, people like to sometimes say to me, oh, you do the Jewish festivals? I'm like, read Leviticus 23. It says, God says, these are my festivals, which then He tells the Israelites, you are to proclaim. But they belong to God. So they're His, He gets to set the rules. He's the boss. So He sets the times and the seasons. These things all are shadows of Jesus Christ. Constantine comes along using a different calendar, the pagan Roman calendar, and says, well, according to our calendar, sometimes the Jews celebrate Passover twice in 1 year. You know, because the way the calendars match up, it'll be, 11 months on their calendar, whatever. So he says, look, why would we want to use the calendar of the Jews, those despicable wretches? Okay, clear anti-Semitism. And he says, we have a better way. And so he sets a different date. Instead of being on the first month, the 15th day on the biblical calendar, he says, no, we're going to do it on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. That's found nowhere in Scripture. And so he changes the date. Jeroboam. He comes up here, he sets the golden calf, and he creates a new holiday, substituting for the holidays that the Bible talks about. Is what Constantine did any different than this? Yet Christians today celebrate the resurrection of Christ, which is supposed to be shadowed by the festivals that Paul says in Colossians, on the wrong day. Is Christianity following Jeroboam?
And I can read you here to continue, again, from Kings 1, the end of chapter 12. Okay, he set up one in Beit El, placed the other in Dan, the altars. That proved to be a cause of guilt, for the people went to worship the calf at Bethel and the one at Dan. He also made cult places and appointed priests from the ranks of the people who were not of Levitical descent. He stationed at Bethel the priests of the shrines that he had appointed to sacrifice the calves he had made. And this is exactly what Greg is saying here. Jeroboam established a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month in imitation of the festival in Judah. He established one in Beit El. He ascended the altar there on the 15th day of the 8th month, the month in which he had contrived of his own mind to establish a festival for the Israelites. Jeroboam ascended the altar that he had made in Beit El. When you change the calendar, you have control over the religion. Something that most of us never think about. Okay, but we talked about the Samaritans yesterday, like who they were exactly, and I said, I'll go up there to see their Passover sacrifice when it's a month before or a month after my Passover. Their calendar is this calendar. It's the Israelite calendar. Jeroboam changes the calendar and changes the holidays, and the Samaritans, who get conflated with Israelites, right, because they're up here, right, in the northern area. When you go up to the Samaritan village today and you look at their calendar, you're looking at this calendar. They have kept that ancient calendar, and you can see how it's different. All right, and you can see how dating and when you're celebrating the holidays is going to make all the difference. All right, you've seen it right here.
And here it is a month. It's a month. It's in the 8th month, so it's a month after Sukkot.
Yes,
He
exactly.
puts it a month later. It's a month off, and that's about. Well, it varies again because of the difference in calendars, but Easter and Passover can be as far as a month apart.
You can take, for example, what the Muslims do today, because they're the only ones who really do a pilgrimage. They do their pilgrimage to Mecca, right, during Ramadan. So they control Islam on that level, because they control people coming in to do the Hajj, to do that pilgrimage, based on their calendar and the holy site that they control. So a lot of religion comes down to power and control. All right, which is what we're supposed to stay away from. God's in control. God has the power. You're just doing what he's telling you to do. But people being people will always use that. And just look at today's newspaper and see what's going on. All right, so these biblical stories are so much more than just the biblical stories. You can take out the names and put different names in from today, which is this is why it's a living book. It's not just like some history book on the shelf that you pull down to read about what happened a long time ago. All right? It's giving you clues for what's going on today.